Welcome to the show, Matt. I am so excited to have you on.
Megan, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Can you give our listeners a little bio of who you are and where in the world you are currently joining me from today?
Absolutely. I'm calling in from Chapel Hill, North Carolina. So a little small college town here in North Carolina. My bio is I'm an entrepreneur turned accidental psychonaut. I have a master's in psychology and neuroscience and mental health, and really a specialty in psychedelic medicine has been my focus for the past little bit over 3 years.
I would love to know how one even gets involved in that. Like, have you always been into the health and wellness space? Why did you lean in towards psychedelics? Like, how did you get started on this path?
No, unlike you, I did not do 500 hours of yoga training to find my way here. I was just a normal business guy building businesses for business sake, and I'm a good entrepreneur. Almost 4 years ago, some friends who I trust said, "Why don't you do this guided psilocybin journey with us?" And I'm like, "I don't know. It doesn't sound like something I would normally do," but I did it, and I just couldn't believe what I saw and felt and how it changed the way I looked at the world. And I had no idea this other realm was possible. And as fast as possible after that particular journey, I turned all of my attention in this direction. So I went back to school to get this master's, started attending every psychedelic conference I could find, started working with different spiritual leaders and indigenous people to just show me, teach me more. And then as an entrepreneur, I was looking for where can I add some value and help people get access and by making it more affordable and easy to get. And that led to starting this telehealth company, HAPPԻ, which I'm happy to talk about a little bit later. But yeah, that's what got me into this journey. So it was really by accident. And I am so grateful to be on this path right now.
I feel like for me, being in this space, there's a kind of a few things that come up for me. One, I think you hear some people who are like, I was a partier back in the day. I used to smoke weed and do cocaine and do all of these things. So it's not really it's kind of a natural, I guess, next step for them to try psilocybin, uh, ashwagandha, all of these other things. And then you have other people who are like, I've never done anything, but they have this desire to try these things, or they're kind of like really unsure, but they hear the experience of what people have gone through and they're like, that sounds amazing. I would love to try that. So, was this kind of like, you said psilocybin, you weren't really sure about it. Did you, was there any sort of like back experience that you're like, hey, this will be fun, let's do it? Or was there like some nerves involved in trying it out?
Totally. I am a bit of a controlling person in terms of how I structure my life. And the idea of turning myself over to a medicine for 6 to 7 hours was scary. I mean, I'm not a big drinker for that reason. And I didn't do drugs historically. So it was very, very different. Um, but I trusted my friends. I trusted that there's a lot to learn. I just didn't understand what that meant. And in some ways I was even a little bit cavalier. It's like, oh, you like travel. This is like a big trip in your head. All right. But now that I understand what this can do for depression and anxiety and OCD and eating disorders, it's just amazing. And I do think it's beautiful, all the different reasons and ways people find themselves drawn to psychedelic medicines. And I think there's room for all of it. Did you, and now are you experienced? I don't know, Megan, have you participated in psychedelic medicine? Where are you in this path?
I actually, it's funny because people ask me about it all the time, and I have led a retreat, and I've gotten some feedback of people going, do a psychedelic retreat. And I'm like, first of all, I'm not qualified to do any of that. Like, I would never
Mm-hmm.
undertake that. But then I got to thinking, like, would I do this? Because, like I've only ever smoked weed when I was like 20. And that I do not like smoking weed. Like, I'm not a person who really likes it. It kind of heightens my anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, I've heard some incredible things in doing psilocybin on its own. But I think what really piqued my interest semi recently is all this kind of research that's starting to come out with people who are postpartum and doing it. And even though I don't have kids, that is something that I would love to explore down the line. And if I can offer people some sort of alternative rather than doing antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication, I would love to be able to say this is a great alternative for you to try to explore. So I've never done it. I would. I think I would like to try, but I'm also like I feel like I might have to be kind of in the moment. Like if I think too much about it, I might talk myself out of it.
That you brought up a lot of things there in that little roundabout disclaimer story. um it would, I think it's probably good for your listeners to understand that like psychedelic medicine is very different than cannabis. So there are people out there who have had bad experiences or don't like what cannabis does with regards, especially with anxiety. Today's cannabis with the heightened what's called THC and the decreased CBD has led to, like, for the first time ever, people are having psychotic breaks on cannabis. And so it's very, very different. It's a different experience. It's a different process. A lot of cannabis, not all, is done just totally recreationally, and much of psychedelic medicine is done intentionally and for medicinal purposes. Again, no judgment. There's room for recreational everything, but it's a different process. And then in terms of postpartum, I mean, the work on all sorts of um, depression. It's just the results are pretty incredible with psychedelic medicine.
I would actually love to ask you about that. What sort of research or what sort of studies are coming out there? Like, what specific type of psychedelics is someone taking to
Mhm.
help with anxiety and depression? Is it specifically one? Is it a couple of different things? And then how exactly does it help treat that? Because I feel like the band-aid approach right now, and it's so sad to see, but everybody's, I know, I would say 80% of people who are on or have been on anti-anxiety and antidepressant medication, myself included, and I feel like it's just personally the wrong approach or a short-term solution to a long-term, journey you have to work through.
Without a doubt. I mean, there's kind of two price tags to antidepressants that we all know that they don't work on roughly 40-ish% of the population. So price tag number one is you're going to spend 8 to 14 weeks of your life trying to get a particular antidepressant to see if it works or if it doesn't, and then maybe doing a second, and then maybe doing a third. It's a lot of time. And it's a lot of time to live in pain. So that's price tag number one. Price tag number two is just the side effects. Again, somewhere between 50 and 73%, at least according to one study, a couple studies, excuse me, have sexual dysfunction with antidepressants, gastrointestinal issues, suicidal ideation, particularly in young people, sweats, weight gain, memory loss. I mean, the side effects are significant. So, but we live in a world where you typically go down that path first before finding your way to a psychedelic medicine. It can be a tough journey for a lot of people. With in Canada and the States, the only legal option is ketamine right now. So ketamine is a legal psychedelic that is very effective for depression and anxiety. In Canada, you have a 56-1 exemption where some people can get, I'm not sure it's just terminally ill or how you qualify up there, but you can get access to a psilocybin and MDMA with that 56-1 exemption, which is cool and ahead of where we are here in the States. And then here we have two medicines that the FDA has given breakthrough therapy designation to, MDMA and then psilocybin. And we expect MDMA to be legal here in the next couple of years and psilocybin shortly thereafter. Do you want to talk about ketamine for a moment on
Yeah,
this?
I would like
Or
to.
tell me.
Yeah, that's okay. I
Where
would
would you like
love
to go?
to break down even the difference between psilocybin, ketamine, and MDMA. Like if someone's like, "What's the
What is he
difference?"
talking
and where
about?
where do what would I do essentially?
Yeah. So start with ketamine and then we'll work our way backwards. So ketamine is legal and it's used here. Again, I'm not so sure on Canadian law and how the nuance of it, but here it's called off-label. So our FDA approved it back in like 1970 as an anesthesia. And it started to be used for mental health as early as 74. But any doctor or prescriber can prescribe ketamine if they think it's going to help their patient. Um, what ketamine does, so it was an anesthesia, and it's used in a lower dose setting, and it can be done intravenously, where they hook you up to an IV. It can be done intramuscularly, where they give you a shot. It can be done nasally, where you use a nasal bottle, or you can do it at home using sublingual or oral tablets. So a lot of different methods of administration. And what it does is it behind the scenes is it changes what's called the glutamate activity and increases your what's called the BDNF in your brain, which is going to improve neuroplasticity and synaptic strength. So all that's really cool in terms of neurogenesis, neuroplasticity. It then stifles, like we have this default mode network. And if you can imagine just someone turning the volume down on it for a little bit, which allows us to have some relief from kind of the normal worry and those types of thoughts related to anxiety. So all that gets turned down. Then, because it's a dissociative, what was a side effect as an anesthesia, in here it's a positive. It allows us to kind of unlock these subconscious thoughts and repressed memories and emotions, which helps us open up. And you can open up either during a session that you're taking with the ketamine or even after. So it just depends on how you're taking it. And then it has this fourth thing where for some people it has a spiritual effect, which helps them connect to kind of a greater meaning of life around them. It offers some peace and some relief from the depressive symptoms or feelings of hopelessness. So all of that can happen in these 1 hour journeys with ketamine. And typically people will take one session a week for 6 weeks. And then that might be enough for some people. That's it. And for others, maybe you take it once every 2 weeks, once every 4 weeks to do kind of a tune up, depending on what brought you to that medicine. So that's kind of a high level overview of ketamine. Any questions on that, or did that make sense?
No, you answered my question that I had was like, is this something somebody's doing weekly, daily, monthly? Is it forever? Is it for a few weeks? But and it sounds like from what you're saying and just kind of my experience of hearing other people go through this, it's like you're getting to the root cause of what is causing you this anxiety or depression or a trauma and just kind of bringing it to the forefront and confronting it and seeing like, why am I acting the way I do? What is my depression? Like, where is this stemming from? And just kind of becoming conscious or aware of it and working through it.
Yeah, with all of these medicines and ketamine included, when you remove the shame, blame, and guilt associated with whatever that memory is, and you can just look at it with fresh eyes, a healing can potentially take place. And sometimes those things you're looking at are decades and decades ago, and that you've been carrying them around maybe without even realizing them. Um, but yeah, super super powerful as a healing tool if that's why you're approaching the medicine. And then for many people, they might approach it because they know they're anxious, or they know they have depression, or they're like, oh, I want to just be the best possible me, and there's nothing specific I can put my finger on. All right, all of that's beautiful, all of that's fine. For me, I found things in my past that I didn't realize I was carrying around until they came out. I mean, just one example. My mom died when she was 49, and in that first magic mushroom or psilocybin experience, I reconnected with her and realized that I've been afraid of dying. I've been living my life afraid of dying. I also realized like I felt so loved and secure in this experience. It was like, oh my God, I don't remember feeling this loved and secure. I forgot that I could feel this way. And then once I had that memory of what it was like, I could then take that forward when I wasn't on the medicine and be like, I want to feel like this. And it gives me that grounding stone to keep coming back to. And I think that's true for a lot of people who use psychedelic medicine.
No, I love that so much. What would the difference be between the psilocybin and the
MDMA.
MDMA? There we go. Since you explain ketamine so eloquently, what would be the difference between the other medicines, and why would somebody use one or the other?
Um, so I'm gonna it's a good question. So I'm gonna approach it this way. When we talk about MDMA, we talk about it as a heart opener. So it still has a lot of the effects in terms of being able to look back at trauma and process it. Doesn't have the visuals that are typically associated with psilocybin or some of the somatic experiences that are associated with ketamine, but it really opens up the heart. There's a sense of love. There's a sense of an overwhelming sense of you are enough, you are okay, um, and that you have been and you always will be with MDMA, and it's really beautiful. The the powerful statistic I'll give you with MDMA is this: there's we all know or might know people who have post traumatic stress disorder, and for many people they're treatment resistant. The existing therapies just don't work. So think about veterans, first responders, victims of sexual assault. These are these yeah, challenging post traumatic experiences. There's a phase 3 clinical trial here that in the United States where they took people who were treatment resistant PTSD, 2 sessions with MDMA, and 67% no longer qualified as having PTSD. It's such a large number. And because that number is so large, and because nothing has worked here in the States, where we have kind of a dysfunctional political system, you're getting both sides of the aisle supporting MDMA therapy. You're getting the FDA saying yes, this makes sense. We're getting donors on the to the nonprofit. There's a nonprofit here, the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies, that has really pioneered this work, and they're getting donors from every walk of life because this works, and it works where nothing has. And it's the biggest opportunity in mental health and since the invention of the antidepressant, which was more than 50 years ago. So yeah, that's MDMA. Can it be used for other things besides PTSD? Absolutely. But what it's that's really where the focus of the studies are now. And then psilocybin or magic mushrooms, is psilocybin would be the active ingredient in the magic mushrooms. Um, Johns Hopkins and Imperial College, lot of research. The focus there has really been terminally ill patients and trying to quickly relieve some of the depression and anxiety that they feel. Um, and then, so that's kind of one batch of research that's obviously getting, it's again, just like it's hard to argue about, let's support our veterans. It's kind of hard to argue with, let's support our terminally ill brothers and sisters. But they're also showing things like for curbing alcohol use and curbing smoking and other types of depression, anxiety, and again OCD, eating disorders. So I think there's a lot of things. The major difference between a ketamine experience and a psilocybin or MDMA is time. You can do ketamine in about an hour. So prep an hour of an experience, and then some a little bit of coming out of it, and then you're kind of back to normal. Psilocybin or MDMA, you're talking about 6, 7, 8 hours, depending on the dose. So it's a very different experience.
When someone is doing something like that or a psychedelic experience, is it the best way to go about doing it on some sort of like controlled clinic or on a retreat where someone is holding the space, right? You have somebody there who's essentially like controlling it or making sure that you're okay and you're not going to hurt yourself? Or is there even like a way for somebody to do it at home? Because I can also appreciate that for some people, I don't know what the cost associated with this is, but I can even think of if someone ever comes on a retreat with me, like it's not cheap, right? And I can only imagine if I needed to have some sort of psychedelic involved in it, it probably would become quite expensive. But if someone's like, this sounds incredible, this sounds amazing, and I would like to try it, like, is there a way to even do it at home? Or is that like, I would never recommend that? That is not something that I think people should try.
Really appreciate that question. There's 3 S's that we talk about, which is set, setting, and source. So I'll start with source because it's the easiest one. Source is, where did your medicine come from? So what's nice about working in a clinical model, again, none of this is perfect. So again, we can break that down, but let's talk about the clinical model. When you're working with a prescriber of some sort, you know that the source of your medicine is pharmaceutical grade quality, and that makes a difference. For those that are, and then psilocybin, you can oftentimes just buy the mushrooms or buy the dried mushrooms. So the probability of that being a quality product is pretty high. But when you talk about other synthetics, and many times you just don't know what you're buying. There's a study of MDMA out there where they bought a ton of street drugs and something like 50% had no MDMA in it. None. Sold as MDMA. And but it was a mixture of other stuff. Another 20 or 30% was laced, had something else inside. Maybe 20 or 30% was pure. It was just awful statistics. So I do tell parents, especially parents of teenagers, there's a company called Dance Safe, or an organization which sells test strips. If you think your kids may be looking or procuring drugs, if they can afford the drugs, they help them with the test strips, to know what you're taking. We have kids here in America dying all the time from fentanyl overdoses, and they had no idea they were taking something with fentanyl in it. So yeah, so that's source. The set refers to your mindset. So what brought you there? So there's, again, like we talked about, you can come for religious reasons, you can come for mental health reasons, you can come for recreational reasons, lots of different reasons to optimization reasons that brought you to psychedelic medicine. But what is your mindset? And then ideally, someone prepares you in advance for the what ifs. So you're going to take ketamine, you're going to put this medicine in your mouth for 15 minutes. It's for the next hour, you're going to feel disassociated from your body. You might have these types of experiences. If something bad happens, you do this or whatever. They help prepare you so that you know what to expect. Um, and each medicine, just having someone walk you through the what to do when is helpful. And then also the mindset is also, are you ready? Do you feel called to this? Are you scared? Having time to talk about your intention, all of that is important, which then brings us to setting. So in the setting, it's who's with you. Are they people you love and trust? Or is the sound controlled? Are you worried about being interrupted? Are you worried about the place? All of those things in a medical setting. Okay, you don't have to worry about that as much. But there are, like my company, Happy, is a telehealth company. So we're sending people medicine and we're helping prepare them in advance, but they're doing it in the comfort of their home, which if you have the luxury of having a home environment where you can do that, that's great. For those that don't, there are many, many ketamine clinics and places that you can go and use their facilities. But it costs more money, but it's possible. And then alternatively, you can always try to work at a friend or family's house and do that. So the least expensive option is the telehealth option because you've removed some of those steps, and then the clinics from there. And then you also just brought up retreats, and kind of the same general rules apply to retreats. So can they be expensive? Sure. But there's a retreat for kind of every budget. In my book, in Psychedelics for Everyone, I do have a whole thing about how do you pick a good retreat location. Um, and what I'd encourage people to do is ask I think if I was going to ask two questions, the two questions I would ask would be, how many people are going to be on this retreat with me? There are some beautiful retreats with under 20 people, under 40, and there's other retreats with 80 or 100 people doing psychedelic medicine at the same time. My personal opinion, that's a lot. Others might be comfortable with that. So at least know what you're getting into and know if you're comfortable with that. And then the second question is just, if anything, if there is any medical issue, what do you have on staff to help? Again, the beautiful part about most psychedelic medicine is there aren't a lot of um, side effects which would lead to a medical issue, but there's just the regular medical stuff that happens. And while on psychedelics, having proximity to care it can be important because you're in a state where your mental faculties aren't going to be making might not be making the best medical decisions for yourself.
That actually leads me to a question I have for you, because I do know someone who is in January going on a retreat in Costa Rica to do psilocybin retreats. I believe it's psilocybin. And he had to go through an interview, or he's going
Mm-hmm.
through an interview. And I think one of the things that they do is just make sure that you're medically stable to do this. Is there anyone who should not be doing any ketamine, MDMA, or psilocybin? Like if anyone is prone to like if they had a heart attack recently, or if they have really bad OCD? Like, is there anyone who is like, I would not recommend this type of person do this, or at least not under very strict medical care?
So I'm going to answer that with a there's a couple of nuances to your question. So first, I think wherever your friend is going is that's a good example of if you're going to a retreat or participating in a psychedelic experience and they're not doing a medical intake, that's a pretty big red flag. You want them asking those questions to know what medications you're on, what your history is, so that you can find out, are you a good match for each other? And I'll use us as an example again on the telehealth side. HAPPY, we are great with kind of middle of the road depression, anxiety, optimization. But if you have severe post-traumatic stress disorder, you have severe suicidal ideation, ketamine might be good for you, but not telehealth. So and the same thing is true in retreat. So why are you going to that retreat, and are they a good fit for you is a great question to ask. The nuance of the question you're asking, though, in regards to who is a good fit or not, kind of ties back to that Western model for how is research done in our countries. And it's hard enough to get to do research on psychedelic medicine that our researchers, for the most part, pick people that are kind of going to be cleaner profiles. So there's not a lot of research on bipolar or schizophrenia or autistic, or people with even one degree of or in their family with those types of things. Dr. James or Jim Fadiman says he talks about kind of the citizen scientists. So if you go into the Reddit groups, not always the best source of information, but you can find there is an autistic community, there is a bipolar community of people who say we do psychedelics and these are our experiences. So the more you slide into those types of categories, the harder it's going to be to get Western medical science to say, yes, you are a good candidate for psychedelic medicine. So am I sitting here saying that you should not do that? I'm not. But I'm saying it's something that you probably should spend some more time thinking about and researching and make sure it's right for you. But it's a tricky question. I can tell you that if you're taking antidepressants and especially SSRIs or MAOIs, MAOIs, that the serotonin, you have to watch your serotonin levels. So, and many times they're going to say you have to wean yourself off of those before taking ayahuasca or psilocybin or MDMA. Ketamine is a bit of an exception. Ketamine works with your glutamate system instead of your serotonin, and it is one of the few psychedelic medicines you can take while on antidepressants. So, yeah, but definitely be aware of the contraindications medically would be where I'd start, and then the second place is how severe is your trauma, and just is wherever you're going, are they set up to work with it? Working with vets with PTSD is very different than working with an entrepreneur who has some anxiety and depression.
I know that makes complete amount of sense. And I think that would be the case for anything. Like, you do have to do your own research and be your own advocate and make sure that it is a good fit for you. I know we were just talking about different sort of categories of people who should be maybe doing a bit more research or seeing if they would be a good fit or not. But is there even like an age group? And reason why I asked this is because I have been so disappointed and upset about how it seems like younger people are and being described antidepressant and anti-anxiety medication. Like, would this be something like if a parent was like, they're prescribing my 14, 15, 16, 17-year old with all of this Western medicine that I don't really necessarily want them to do, but I'm at a loss of, helping them. Could they be doing something like this? Is this something, again, that you would wait until they're a little bit older? Like, I don't know if this would have any effect on brain development. And on the flip side, too, is there even like the older you get, the more risk you run of, maybe having a heart attack or something during an experience? I'm so new to this. I wouldn't even know which way to go.
Uh, Great question. So I'm gonna work backwards here. I'm gonna start in the heart attack just because I want to I want to go back to ketamine. Super powerful medicine, needs to be treated with respect. If you have unmanaged high blood pressure, it's something to watch out for. It can increase your blood pressure, and that can be a risk. On the other hand, if it's managed, it doesn't increase it so much that it's typically not a risk, but it's at least something to be aware of. Most psychedelic medicines not only have low side effect profiles, they have relatively low risks of things like cardiac events. There's no lethal dose of a number of psychedelics. Ibogaine, we haven't touched on that yet. Heavily used for opioid disorders. But that has a pretty high risk of, or sorry, has a risk of cardiac, and that's something you definitely want to um, really consider doing that in a medical environment versus a ceremonial. It carries some more risks with that particular psychedelic compared to others. So then you brought up the parent component and kids, and I mean, again, I have a 17 and a 19-year-old, so this hits close to home. Um, it is hard as parents because we believe what our doctors tell us. So when a doctor says you should put them on medication, it's it gives pause. And I would encourage each parent to think about, what does that mean? There's medications that can make a huge difference for a number of people when they work. Um, the question is, it ties back to, why are they being really, why, what is the root of why they're being prescribed this medicine? Are they being prescribed it because they're not able to function in the school setting the way the school wants them to? And that begs some questions. That begs, and there's some privilege of, well, I don't want to send them to that particular school, or I want to do a different type of option. And maybe, are they being prescribed it because they can't interact socially and just have the developmental time? There's just, what is that reason? So trying to get to that root. Did they have trauma or things in their past? Are they stuck on some identity challenges? um Self-esteem issues? What's going on that we're trying to cure with a pill versus maybe taking a longer route, but working through some other different systems to work? Can you maybe do a lighter dose and do the systems and do some kind of hybrid? I have been, again, I went from being knowing nothing about psychedelic medicine to now seeing a lot of different uses. And I've been shocked in a good way about how many teenagers I've seen at different psychedelic events with their parents. And I'm talking about parents that are absolutely mainstream, successful parents with kids that look like our kids. And um, and how they're working as a family together to look at each other as humans, and for the child to understand that we're just doing the best we can as parents. There's no instruction manual to being a parent, and now you get to see us with our masks off, and then conversely, we're looking at you. We respect you as a human, and we're here to help you in this, and to shed the things that aren't serving you and to add things that are. Um, so historically, in different cultures, like in ayahuasca as an example, in the indigenous communities in Colombia, I mean, they start as babies taking ayahuasca. It might be just a little bit on a finger, but they start very, very young, and the community's doing it throughout their life. So there's not a lot of research for children, but anecdotally, in the citizen scientists that Jim Fadiman talks about, there's there's a lot of teenagers who are partaking in this community.
Well, you say things like there's not a lot of anecdotal or like studies and stuff, but I feel like that's the same with Western medicine. It's like we don't really know the long-term effects 100, 200 years down the road. Like we might know in 5 years, but I guess the reason why I asked this too is it's something that, I mean, I was diagnosed very young, grade 5, with obsessive compulsive disorder, and I was put on antidepressant and anti anxiety medication
Hmm.
right away. And it was the one thing that you said at the start that really resonated with me was how many different strands or different types of medication I went through before I found the one that quote unquote worked. I mean, I had an experience where my mom found me like cowering in a corner, crying about the dragons that were trying to get me because I was like having, I was seeing things that weren't there. The first one, my suicidal ideology became more pronounced. Like I got really into cutting and all this stuff, and then The other one, I had the psychotic break almost
Mm-hmm.
on it. And then I found one that leveled me. So I never really felt happy, but I never really felt depressed. I never really felt joy, but I wasn't really anxious anymore. I was just like coasting through. And I think it always makes me so nervous to think of like having kids down the road. Like I would never want my child to go through the things that I went through. And I was grade 5 until I was 18 or 19 on this medication, and no fault to my parents. It was like, we just want our daughter to stay alive. Like she's talking about committing suicide. And my hope would be like, if that was something like my child was interested in, like absolutely, like why wouldn't I give this a go or a try, as opposed to the traditional Western medicine that, yeah, there is a time and a place, I think, for it for some people. But knowing what I went through and the experience that I had, I would be so open to trying an alternative if that was something that my child or somebody I knew who was younger wanted to try.
So I want to just take a moment, just take a pause between what you just said because it deserves a pause. That was beautiful and sharing and revealing, and thank you. Um and I think at one level I'd encourage you to potentially think about, there's a notion that everything's perfect, not necessarily okay, and that it all happens because it needs to happen. So you're here sitting there having this conversation today, reaching thousands of people, bringing up what you're bringing up because of what you went through. So it's not what you would have scripted for yourself, but it made you who you are. And would you take that away from your kids? Because we just don't know ever with anything. Could be good, could be bad, who knows? Um, and from the parent perspective, it's like we all do the best we can, knowing what we know at this moment in time. And in retrospect, it's like, oh yeah, I probably would have done that differently, but it is what it is. So I love all that being said. I do love what you're saying, that with where you are now and for your child, you'd be like, you know what? I think we should try something else. And I'm open to it. I'm open to everything that that means, because the medicine is just one little piece of that puzzle that you brought up. It's all of it. It's how you look at your child. It's how you interact. It's how you think about them. It's how you think of their place in the world. It's how you think about what they need to survive and to thrive, and it's all beautiful. Um, and I that's kind of where I feel like we're all on this. We are expanding consciousness. We are changing the way the world works, and it's you coming to the conclusion you've come to, um, and other people coming to hopefully similar conclusions, that allows this to become medicine, accepted medicine, allows us to have true discussions on mental health and to be open about it, and to be no more embarrassed about having a period of time where we're cutting or having suicidal ideology than you would be about having a broken leg. It's just something we went through. And now we're on the other side, and we carry all that perspective with us.
Yeah, I love that so much. I would love to know, what is, I guess, what is the difference between what you're talking about doing these retreats or going to a clinic or even doing it at home versus like microdosing? What is
Mm.
the difference between it? What would be the benefits of one kind of versus the other? And like, what does that even look like? Like for someone to microdose psilocybin, or I'm not sure if you can
LSD would be
microdose
the
yet.
other one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll do a couple things. I have a guide to microdosing, and I'll just put it up at my website, mattzemon.com/balance your life. I'll make a little landing page, and people can go there and download this guide to microdosing. But let's talk about, what is microdosing. So when you microdose, when people say, oh, microdosing, that is typically a tenth to a 20th of a regular dose. So it's a very small, what's called a sub-perceptual amount of medicine. So the idea is, if you're microdosing correctly, you don't really feel it. You can drive, you can work, you can go about your life, but you have taken some psychedelic, a little small amount. Um, the idea is that everything is kind of, the blues are bluer, the grays are less gray. You feel more connected, you feel more loved, you feel more creative. That's the idea. Is there a lot of research on this? No, but there's some, and it's inconclusive. There's some research that says, yes, it does all these things. There's other research that says, no, it's a placebo. I don't know. For a lot of people, they find it very effective. In Canada, you have some companies that are like I think Soulcybin, Soulcybin is a Canadian company that has a beautiful microdosing product that you can mail order. And it comes packaged and it comes in different, you can do a sample pack of different strengths to figure out what's the strength for you. And we don't have those options in the States. But you do. I'm not quite sure how you do, but you do. Um, so that's what people's talking about. Typically, it's mushrooms or LSD. And then the only other thing, if people are considering microdosing, there's kind of two set protocols that are recommended. So a famous mushroom guy named Paul Stamets talks about he has a stack where he's like, okay, take a little psilocybin with lion's mane or Reiki, this other or Neosin, and you do it 3 or 4 days in a row, and then you take off for 3 days. Then you do it again, and you take off. And every 30 days, take off for a couple weeks. So that's his protocol. Jim Fadiman, who we talked about before, he wrote the Psychedelic Explorer's Handbook. Um, he says take it on day one, stays in your body on day two, it's out on day three, you do it again on day four. And again, you do that for about a month, take a couple weeks off. So you want to give a couple weeks to let it clear your system every 30 days or so. So all that's in this guide to microdosing. You're welcome to have it. And yeah, hopefully that's helpful. But that's very different than going to a retreat or going to in a clinical trial and doing a macro dose where you're doing 5 grams of mushrooms. It's a very, very, very different experience where you're definitely feeling it. You're definitely having a very psychedelic experience.
Would microdosing be something that someone should try before they do like a macro dose, or is it kind of like depends on what you're going for, what the end goal is? You could do one without doing the other and it would be fine. Or yeah, is it like try microdosing first? If it works, great. Then you can try the macro dose and see if that works for you.
They're two different animals. So it's really what are you trying to achieve? People, I think if I remember correctly, this kind of how microdosing got popular is back in the 60s. There's this study out in California where they took 27 individuals who had some type of work problem that they couldn't solve for 3 months or more, and they gave them all mescaline, again, another psychedelic, and 13 of them solved the problem. So that was, and then so Silicon Valley's kind of latched on, and Steve Jobs famously was a big psychedelic proponent. So the idea I think behind microdosing is if it works in the macro, can I just take a little bit and will that enhance my performance, enhance my everyday life? That's the theory. So for enhancement, for turning the blues up, the grays down, sure, try microdosing. But if you're looking for kind of bigger shifts and bigger shifts and I keep talking I talk about psychedelics as a catalyst. It's not a cure, it's a catalyst. So because we forget what does it feel like to be loved? What does it feel like to be enough? What does it feel like to have the weight of the world off our shoulders? Until those things are lifted, until our neurons are connecting again like they used to when we were kids, we forget. So these larger doses kind of can shake that up in a really beautiful way. And then from there, you can move on and you have, again, something to aim for. And for many, many people, they do a large dose of a psychedelic once, twice in their life, and they can then work from there. Others choose to do it more frequently. Again, no judgment. But it can be a big catalyst for changing your lifestyle.
And I love that you said it's a catalyst for a lot of things. Like yes, it can do incredible things and it can have all these wonderful benefits, but I think it's up to the person to keep that kind of lifestyle going. It's like I don't know, CBD right now is a really big thing. My husband works with a CBD company, and I feel like people will come to him and be like, "Will this cure my insomnia? Like I can't sleep. I want to take this CBD." And it's like, "Yes, it will help, but also like it doesn't make a difference if you're watching scary movies till 2 o'clock in the morning and you're drinking soda before you go to bed and you're a really high strung person. Like it's not a miracle worker. It's just it's like you said, it's almost like a catalyst. Like you have to have these proper health and wellness practices in place for it to really make a difference. You can't eat a salad and then once a week and have McDonald's the rest of the week. Like that's not how this works.
Yes, that's the perfect analogy. These are this helps change the habits. But I think for a lot of people, especially people who've had depression or anxiety for a long time, just the where do you start is such an overwhelming question. It's like, I can't even get off the couch, or I just don't, no, I just can't start. And for some people, taking this first step, okay, I'm going to do a psychedelic experience at home with ketamine, with whatever, I'm going to retreat, finding again that love, that acceptance. And it's not as much of an intellectual exercise as it is a somatic, energetic exercise, which like, oh, I know what to do. I don't need you to tell me what to do. I know what to do for myself. And then once you know that inside, you can then do that. Um, and I don't, again, there's lots of other ways to get to here. I'm not saying psychedelics are the only way, but for a number of people, psychedelics are a good way to find that internal voice again and be able to carry that into the world.
You've gone to all these conferences, you're an expert in this space. Besides helping to treat with anxiety and depression, PTSD, trauma, is there any other health optimization benefits that have been, maybe there's a study that's being currently done or that has been done, or even, there's this thought process like, hey, maybe it could really help prevent Alzheimer's disease because it's helping to strengthen the neuroplasticity in the brain.
Hmm.
Is there anything else that, like from a health optimization perspective, that you're seeing psychedelics really help play a part in?
So there are 309 academic institutions either studying psychedelics or with psychedelic centers as of now. So at least everywhere you look, somebody's looking into this and what could it do? And and lots of different philosophies. Like some are saying, oh, we want to remove the hallucinogenic properties and see if they still work. All right, that's interesting. I don't necessarily think so, but we'll find out. And others are saying, well, can we decrease can we find a way to do magic mushrooms in 4 hours? And how can we do that? Still have the potency, but decrease the length. Some are looking at what are the effects on the nervous system? What are the effects on neurogenesis? And can we increase that faster? And can we use it for other things? I think as a whole, the application, if you think of anything that is rooted in either previous experience or in thought process. So examples would be like we talk about addiction. So it's easy to talk about drug addiction, alcohol addiction, or substance use disorders, but we talk less about addiction to work, addiction to porn, addiction to spending. I mean, there's so many addictions that we just don't, as a society, talk about. Um, but it's all kind of that I do this because it makes me feel good somewhere because it's covering something else up. Eating disorders fall heavily into this category. So there's lots of research and more coming on how can psychedelics be used for kind of across the board on these things. Um, Again, I went into, I didn't, for me, I haven't had a drink since doing my first mushroom experience. And it wasn't something I thought about. It was one of the things that just fell away. I don't know why. I don't think anyone knows why, but I think that happens more. It happens enough that it's a thing. And it was completely unexpected for me. Now, if I went in with that intention, maybe I would have had a higher chance of that happening. But so that anything, yeah, where you have these thought patterns. There are studies being done now with autistic people to see can this help in terms of bringing them into a different role or interaction with society. Um, so it's going to be really interesting to see where this goes over the next 10 years with the studies.
Is there anything that I haven't asked you, whether it comes to psychedelics in itself or a protocol that you think has been really transformational in this space? Anything at all that you want the audience to know about?
I think there are two things that were really surprising to me. I grew up in kind of the just say no 70s and 80s where it was like drugs are bad. This is your brain. It's going to fry your brain. There's no medical use. You're going to get addicted. Bad, 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 bad. Um, and doing the research and learning, okay, why were drugs made illegal in 1970 with the Nixon administration and finding out, oh my God, this had nothing to do with science. This was about breaking up kind of the anti-war movement and the some of the civil rights activities that were happening with the Black communities. That's in retrospect awful. And I just didn't know. So I think I would encourage your listeners that have a reaction to psychedelics to kind of just pause, look at it just a little bit. Is it a reaction because what we've been programmed to react? So you're doing exactly what our governments and our schools wanted us to do, or is there something else there? Um, and then same as it ties to religious freedom. I always thought we had religious freedom in our country until it's like, oh, I want to do this as a religious expression. Oh, it's not allowed. Huh. Why not? It's been done for thousands of years for religious purposes, but it's not an approved religion. And what does that mean? And really, in this, in Psychedelics for Everyone in my book, I tried medicine by medicine to just lay out this is the data. Here's the research we know. Here are the things we don't know. But that's so you can make an informed decision. And then I did have every chapter medically reviewed so that there's another set of eyes trying not to be too technical, too opinionated, or just too out there. This is for you to make up your own minds. But it's we are now living in a time with the internet and with access to information that we've never had before, so we can make different decisions. And I think that's exciting. I think and just like you were saying about what do you want for your kids, I would ask everybody else, what do you want for yourself? What do you want for your brothers and sisters down the street? What do you want for the good of society? You might not want to take a psychedelic personally, but how are you going to vote and how are you going to interact with people that are? And yeah, I encourage people to think about that.
I wanted to ask, and I know you said you touched on in your book, you have a section on picking like the right retreat. But
Mhm.
one thing that I kind of hear about, especially in Canada, the US, is like it's not legal to do these types of retreats here. Now, I'm not sure if they're referring to one type of psychedelic or if it's all psychedelics in general. You're not allowed to do it legally here. I guess it's a two-part question is A, is that true? And B, if it is true, like where are people usually going to? Is it Central America? Is it South America? Are those the more popular places? Because I guess it is legal there. I guess if a listener's like, oh my God, Bob down the street is doing a retreat in his backyard, like maybe that's not the place to be going to.
So there are legal ketamine retreats in America. I'm sure there are in Canada as well. Um, there are underground retreats of every flavor in both America and Canada. So again, if you're going to, it's unfortunate that we have to have an underground marketplace because that can lead to bad things. However, there are some fantastic practitioners that run really high quality retreats in Canada and the United States just quietly. They're hard to find if you're not part of the group. Um, so if you do find yourself thinking about one, again, just ask the questions. What is this? The whoever's running it, what is their experience? Is it a couple years or is it a decade? Who did they study from? What is that? What do they have on staff for medical? What are their, how many people are going to be there with you? What is their policy? And like, do they ever date their participants? What are the lines that are there? And can I cover all this in the book? But it's something to be aware of. There are there are some bad actors who are not acting the way I would hope they would, and there's some actors who are might be well intentioned but um, are not experienced enough to be doing what they're doing. So then you talk about, okay, so what are my international options? Again, the same questions apply. Just you have the one thing that's typically removed is the legality risk. But Jamaica has some retreats now, Bahamas, Costa Rica, Peru, are all popular destinations if you want to. So that covers kind of the beginning of the Caribbean and covers uh South America, and Central America. The Netherlands has a number of places for retreats. I think those would be the ones I would say off the top of my head are kind of the big retreat centers for now. And then you can still try for clinical studies. And then for some in Canada with that 56(1) exemption, I know there's some retreat centers being built, but I think it's just for a very narrow band of your population up there.
Amazing. Thank you for speaking on that. I would love if you could talk a little bit about your telehealth company, Happy, because I feel like that's something that I, knowing about you in this company, like I definitely would have utilized, because I've been super curious about even just the idea of microdosing. But like we were talking about at the beginning, I'm almost like, where do I start? I would want to make sure that I'm getting something that is clean and is
Hmm.
not, full of fillers or anything. Cause I think that's something that freaks me out a lot of the time, is like, you just don't know what you're getting. And B, I'm like, well, what do I take? Is even psilocybin or magic mushrooms the right thing? Or should I be doing something else? And how much am I taking? So I would love if you could talk about HAPPY and what it is that you're doing and trying to bridge the gap for people who are interested in this type of experience.
Yep. So Happy is here to fight the unhappiness epidemic that I believe we have right now. There's just massive mental health challenges that cause so much pain, and we are providing these proven evidence-based treatments. So it includes psychedelic-assisted ketamine therapy, but it also includes digital therapeutics and guides and preparation and integration, even medicine as music. We have this beautiful, beautiful soundtracks that take people on journeys when they're doing that with us. And then we've worked really hard to keep our costs down by providing it via telehealth and giving people the ability and the kind of checklist. If you're going to do this at home, these are the things you need to do to be successful. We believe that the research shows that ketamine can really help people suffering with anxiety and depression better in many cases than antidepressants without those side effects. And that there's a reason we have the National Institute of Health here, and they said ketamine was the most important breakthrough in antidepressant treatment in decades, and they called it a miracle medicine. So we believe in all that, and we're trying to get that to as many people as possible. So we launched in Florida. We're going to be adding different states as fast as we can, and then hopefully cross the border at some point and be able to support you up there in Canada. But I think for a lot of people, the telehealth, the cost for most people who are going into a clinic for ketamine, you're talking about $4,500 to $6,000 for your initial 6 treatments. With telehealth, your initial 6 are closer to $1,200. And that's a big difference. So if you have a place and you have a supportive system where you can have somebody be your session companion and you have a quiet place, I think it's a great option for a lot of people. And I'm not sure who is offering telehealth in Canada right now, but I'm sure if not, somebody will be soon. But I do know that in every province you have ketamine clinics now.
Well, you've influenced me to try this. I think that I
Really?
I feel a lot more I've been very leaning towards it, and it's so funny. I was literally just talking to my neighbor about psychedelics and stuff, and because he was talking about and I literally can never say this word right, but
Ayahuasca?
ayahuasca.
Yes,
That's a tricky word.
it's a
Uh
tricky word. It's hard to spell. It's hard to
I
say.
know.
Ayahuasca.
There you go. And I was like, it'd be so amazing to be able to speak to somebody who is an expert in this, because I feel like there's just so many questions. And even the people I know who've done like microdosing magic mushrooms, I'm like, oh, like, where did you get this from? Who did you learn this from? Like, well, why did you do it? And they're like, I don't know. Like, I thought it would be kind of like an experience. And I've heard people have really good breakthroughs
Yeah.
and stuff. So I tried it, and I'm like, I feel like I need to know more information about this before I commit to it. So you've definitely opened my eyes and made it something that I feel really strongly about trying out now.
I am so glad to hear that. I want to respond to one thing you've said though, that just you just triggered here that I think is important with ketamine. So I'm
Yeah.
so glad that's great. I'm glad you're interested in trying one of these. I do want your listeners to know that ketamine is a powerful drug, and it does need to be respected. So there has historically been a party scene ketamine element. Special K is what it's often called. Um, and recreationally, ketamine can be addictive.
Mm-hmm.
And when you use ketamine more than in a clinical setting type, or in a, whether it's telehealth or in a practice, doesn't make a difference. But when you change that type of dosage from what they're giving you to what people are doing recreationally, you run the risk not only of addiction but of like severe bladder issues. Not seen again if you're doing it under the doctor's supervision in that kind of setting, all good. But this is the so I just want listeners to be aware that when we talk about ketamine use under a doctor's care, that's about the dosage. It's about this, how often, and and it's important that if now somebody offers, you hear this podcast, and then you're at a party and someone offers you ketamine, you're like, oh, I heard that's a good thing for my depression, anxiety. It's not the same. We're missing the set and setting and the safety rails around it. So just be aware of that. It's out there. There's a reason it's been a party drug for a lot of years, and it's dangerous when not used with uh with the respect it needs.
No, thank you so much for speaking on that. And there will absolutely be like a disclaimer at the start of this because I want people to make sure that they're doing their own research and everything. And it's honestly, you could take anything in this day and age and give it a unhealthy addiction or a like if you do this in a party type of scene, like even the idea of like cannabis has been used for when people are going through chemo. I
Mm-hmm.
know my parents used it when they were going through chemo and it really helped them. Can you overdo it on cannabis? Absolutely you can. And I feel like that's where people kind of get misinformation from, is that they see it used
Mm-hmm.
in like a party or a recreational sense, or people overdo it, but there are so many good benefits that can come from it, or helpful things. Even my husband right now, he has two herniated discs in his back. He was given Oxycontin. He took it for about two maybe months, and his whole personality and demeanor changed, and he absolutely hated it. He smokes a little bit of cannabis that he grows himself because he just doesn't trust what's out there on the market. And he doesn't suffer with pain anymore, and he still functions like a human being. But it's like even cannabis, people can definitely overdo it with, and then there's other people who are using it for good reasons.
That is, I couldn't agree with you more. And actually, that's the other thing we didn't talk about. Ketamine is for chronic pain. Lots of studies. So people with cluster headaches, trying to avoid the opioids,
Mm.
or to keep them down. There's lots and lots of research on ketamine for chronic pain. Those are different clinics for the most part, but yeah, it's another way to avoid those opioids.
So interesting. I feel like I could keep talking to you about all this. I'm sure there's so many more psychedelics too that we could talk about and get into,
Let's
what
do
is
another
coming.
podcast another day.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I would love to ask before I send my listeners to go and check you out online, is there a book, podcast, or resource that has brought you incredible value? It does not have to be related to psychedelics, although it can be, but anything that's brought you value that you want to leave with them?
Oh, that's I love that. I think since we're talking about psychedelics, if people haven't read How to Change Your Mind, or they're not big readers, check out the Netflix series, 4 hours of your life, and you get How to Change Your Mind. I think that's beautiful. And then there's a really lovely movie called The Wisdom of Trauma that a Canadian, Dr. Gabor Mate was instrumental in. And he's just doing such beautiful work in the world of trauma, and that intersection in many cases between trauma and potentially psychedelics. And he does a lot of work up there with ibogaine and a number of other things. But I think those maybe start there. Those are both good jumping off points.
Amazing. Matt, this has been such an incredible conversation. If people want to check you out online, maybe they want to check out Happy and see if there's anything that you can help them with, where can everybody go and find you?
Yep. And so mattzemon.com. And actually, they go there /balance your life, mattzemon.com /balance your life. They'll get that free microdosing guide. I've got a bunch of videos and things on mattzemon.com, and then happy.me. So happy with two Y's.me. We have a lot of science information up there. And even if we're not in your state, we might find some of that information useful. So a lot of studies are referenced and things like that. And then, of course, Instagram, LinkedIn, all the Facebook, all those good things. Happy to connect and look forward to more conversations.
Perfect. I will make sure everything is linked in the show notes. Thank you so much for this conversation.
Megan, thank you. Thank you for doing what you do and getting this word out there.